Yeah. Yeah. Okay, and don't forget Daydream, D-A-Y, daydream without the M. You're gonna start calling me Double D. Daydream. Think daydream without the M. Exactly. I know. It's totally cheesy. I usually say it's totally cheesy, but I don't know what to do. Totally. Okay. To tell everybody. Great to be with you. You did. You did. Work in progress. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm the founder and CEO of CyberSN. We are where talent meets its match in that we have a job platform that matches cybersecurity professionals to jobs and their profiles. And so, of course, we have staffing services, but really we're changing the game of how people job search. It's a broken system that's hurting us all greatly. And I'm also the founder of SecureDiversity.org, which is not for profit that supports bringing women into cybersecurity and growing them and advancing them. And we put on an event called Day of Security that is really spectacular. It just had 1,100 women together, red team, blue team, EQ tracks, super fun. Yay! Yeah, yeah. Ah, it's right here, by the way, and it's the only drink. It's a ice latte. You can hear the ice, which is basically espresso and oat milk, and I have two big ones a day. Really? Yeah, I love it. It's my go-to all day, every day. It lasts throughout the day, even. I don't. You know, no, we always say people, process technology, and yet I think the reason why we don't is it's a topic that most of us aren't, trained on, never mind have the skills for. It's by design, actually, right? Like soft skills, communication skills, where everybody was told nobody needs that in tech or nobody needs that in cyber. The only people that need that are, executives. And now fast forward in 2022 and it couldn't be, further from the truth. And so we're suffering because we haven't been training on those skills. So I think that we know they're important. We also know that there's a shortage, and so it's really easy for, I think, people to sort of, not conquer this retention issue because there's such a shortage, that people sort of chalk it up to, well, I can't compete. And, what I'm here to tell you is that we can, and that people leave people. And so while a lot of my content is focused on diversity, in inclusive environments. You can't have diversity without all genders, all races working together to have an inclusive environment. And so, really, this content that I've been out speaking about started at ISC Squared Congress late last year, where I rolled out, inclusive cultures come first in order to have diversity. What's an inclusive culture look like? Is really stems from all my work, my work within staffing, in that people are struggling to retain talent, as well as my work in bringing women into cybersecurity and then supporting them in growing and seeing the challenges they have in working in environments that aren't inclusive. And so after years and years and years of lovely people like you too asking me to, well, what does an inclusive environment look like? And so that's what I really want to talk to you about today. Yeah. I know, I know, I know. Well, hopefully everybody gains these skills and becomes dangerous, because that's what we need, meaning dangerously skilled to do well. So let's look at it. So EQ is emotional intelligence. It's the capacity to be aware of, control, and express one's emotions, to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. Like, that's the key, right? That we're able to have relationships, that we are able to be empathetic and interpersonal, right? Whereas IQ is literally the person's level of intelligence measured by tests, right? Like, that's totally different. And so the two together make our personalities. And in today's world of business, we work in teams more than we ever have. And it's the fact that we're working in teams at such a high level that we need to really focus on this, because, you know, communication, changing an and to an or can change a statement. Never mind all the other things that go into statements and things that people are saying. So the first thing we have to do is we have to say, if somebody's going to be in charge of somebody else's career, which is what a manager is, then they need to be trained on emotional intelligence skills. And we can talk about those skills. Like, what do they look like? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. 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 So a couple of things. One is, your our ability from an IQ perspective caps out when the brain is fully developed, and that depends. That depends on the person, but it's somewhere in the mid to high 20s of age. And that is what it is. There is no changing that. Whereas EQ is the opposite. It really can continue. It has nothing to do with that part of the brain that, becomes fully developed. The thing that we have to say to ourselves is, in your analogy of highly technical people getting promoted into management seats, is do they want to care for others? Because if they truly want to care for others, they can learn the skills. The skills are win-win communication. The skills are managing a calendar and time management. The skills are, making and managing measurable agreements. The skills are listening skills. The skills are, the ability to trust and verify. And so I can keep going. I have this what I call the EQ tree for this exact reason. I put all these skills on a tree because we really can, just based on the physical part of our brains, we can develop it. But there has to be a desire. And I wonder if all of those people being put in those management seats, if they were told, look, you're responsible for these people's careers being successful or not successful, I wonder if they'd still want the job. Because it truly, if we're saying that people leave people, we must also then say you're responsible for that person's job. And that's really a serious role, to be responsible for somebody else's career path. And so, yes, we can train, we can develop this if there's a desire, like anything else. There has to be a desire. And I wonder, because a lot of times those promotions come with money, right? And they come with status, exactly. And that's not fair. Yeah. People. That's right. That's right. And right now, so I take that so seriously that if you make a job in our platform using our taxonomy, and the job has a management title or a leadership title, then you have to allocate time for actually managing those people, the time that's needed to spend with them, the time that's needed for career mapping, the time that's needed for reviews. Like, we're asking the employer to say, how much time are you giving this position for the management of people? Because that's the conversation that anybody that has a management title needs to be in. Will they be successful? Do you view my management seat as one where I'm spending time with people, as much as I need to be? So I don't see that in other job descriptions. It just says responsible for them, but not breaking down. How much time do you get doing that? Plus architecture, let's say, because a lot of these folks are going to be architects or, very senior SMEs in some tech background or compliance. So we need to do that. Well, that's the case, right? It's as simple as that. In that, when I was 23, I got my first management role in staffing. As you know, I got to work for the same founders for 21 years across three different companies, and I was trained to be the weapon that I am today, if you will. And I remember when I was at that dinner being promoted to my first time management seat, my mentor saying, "Are you ready to turn on and off the lights?" And I thought, is she nuts? This was the woman at the time. Is she nuts? I'm the first in, the last out. I mean, seriously. And of course, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. In my head, I'm going, she nuts. It took me till a year later when I learned that what she meant was that I have the ability, because I'm now a manager, to turn people on or turn them off. Like my attitude affects their daily performance. And that is something that everybody has to take very seriously. The whole concept of shit rolls downhill, you know, it's true. And if we don't have positive attitude, solution provider attitude, then a culture is never going to be the type of culture that allows high EQ, high empathy, high engagement of relationships, caring for people. So it is very serious, and that means that one has to be judged on that. They have to review has to include positive attitude. I have that in my reviews of anybody in a management seat. Do you come 99% of the time with a positive solutions oriented attitude? That's a skill. I was trained in it, and it needs to happen. Otherwise, it's just a distraction and destruction happening. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. 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 Yes. That's right. We turn that energy on and off in other people because we have the power to fire them, put them on a performance plan. We literally have the power to them being not successful or successful. And that's huge. And I think that it's also makes sense for people to understand that it isn't just in the scenarios where there's a really big problem that hits. It's also just in life. Like, who wants to work around somebody who's constantly complaining about their life or relationships in their life or bringing negative conversations into the workplace? So it is important that when things hit the fan that we're there with positive attitudes, and yet it's just as important that it's just a regular piece of who this manager is that they're not bringing their problems to the workplace. They're not dumping, even if you have them, it's just not appropriate to bring that stress into the environment any rarely, every once in a while, but very rarely. That's funny. That's funny. True. Yeah. 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 Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I was told, and I think everybody should be told, part of what I'm paying for is a positive attitude. Like that's what I was told when I was being hired. Now, I'm paying for that positive attitude. So, yes, it's true. Optimism. Things are never, the glass is never half empty. If you, yeah, yeah, yes, yes. If it's in the review, you will. So put it on your review. Yeah. Yeah. So, look, I'm 50 now, and I've seen, thank you. And I had to make major life changes in my late 20s, like quitting smoking, losing 100 pounds, integrating a workout schedule finding yoga at 31, and I had to embrace that to stay powerful because my health wasn't going to be able to keep up with my role and my advancement. And so I learned young, and I've also watched so many people that I admire and respect lose their health because they don't perform self-care. And so here's the deal. Like I did it at 28 going, I got 300 and something people in my org following me. I'm 28 and they see me smoking and I'm leading them to the promised land, training, hiring, entry level, and I was like I can't do this plus I feel like shit, you know? So my point is like there's a responsibility to caring for ourselves in order to care for others. For one, we need our health to continue caring for others and doing what we do, whether it be at work or at home. And there's also a responsibility as a manager to care for oneself to because you're who people look up to be more money, more responsibility, prestige. And it's just not true that one will be successful past a certain age if they don't do something that makes it to where they are really caring for their health. And so it needs to be a part of the culture. Is that not judging, not telling somebody they're unhealthy or any of that stuff, but managers, actually bringing the conversation to the table, making sure people are scheduling their time wisely so that they have time for themselves, however they want to use it. And leading by example. One of the most important things for a manager is to lead by example for self care. So for me, that I quit smoking more for others than I did for myself at the time, as much as it was affecting my health. That's what did it for me. And so I encourage all managers to think like you're mentoring people. It isn't just for that SME skill, it's for life. In your life, you're showing them a way of life, so to speak. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You can't do that. No. And yes, yeah, yeah. Never, never. So in my org, it's as simple as saying, look, there's a formula to self-care. It's some sort of exercise that gets you moving 4 days a week. It's really focusing on good sleep. It's water intake in a certain amount of day. It's meditation or just time to think and be alone. No matter whether you're an extrovert or introvert, people need some of that time. And so it's holding the space for the conversation. Cultures that are really successful aren't telling people what to do and not to do. I don't, we don't, nobody ever did to me. It's holding the space for a conversation of the stronger we feel, the stronger we are, those kinds of things, and just holding the space for it and making sure people are aware that we care. And if they need to flex their schedule a little to make their self-care program work, we're up for that conversation. And if they have some ideas, we're up for that conversation. But it's also in our value, statements in terms of what CyberSN values is, having a ability to have self-care in our lives. And it's also just things that, we do. So for instance, we do a lot of walking and talking. We do some meetings where people are walking and having their meetings. I take people to yoga things. I give massages for gifts. So it's just that the conversation is there, so the brain is more apt to do something about it because the conversation's always there. But no judgments, never telling people what to do. Exactly. That's right. That's right. We had a chiropractor speak at our offsite about standing and sitting and how much time you want to do and how to make your desk and things ergonomic and yes, exactly. Yeah. Let's have some more latte. I'm gonna have my I mean, I got Well, this is one that needs a lot of work because everybody thinks they have a kindness culture, and yet, there's a lot of unconscious bias, right? What is unconscious bias than anything other than saying or doing things that we didn't know would hurt somebody else? So a kindness environment means we're not hurting other people, which really means our words is most of our interaction, whether they're verbal or whether they're written. And so this comes down to things like, having a culture that doesn't haze or doesn't have nicknames or, is positive. It's really anything that comes out of our mouths, whether it's a reprimand or not, comes with kindness. So, for instance, of course, we all have to reprimand or hold people accountable or whatever. I've been trained since my early 20s on something called kiss, kick, push. So even in the worst times where I have to really confront somebody on performance or a situation, I still must, first thing out of my mouth, be something that's more of a kiss than a kick or a push. And so it's concepts like this that allow us to, have kindness be a part of our culture, even in the hardest times. So, for instance, let's say, John, you told me you were going to have a project done on tomorrow, and tomorrow comes around and you're MIA, which doesn't really happen to me, but let's just let's just say that happened. I mean, it would be a pretty big serious conversation if somebody's MIA. The beginning of that conversation of the kiss is really important, which is, hey, John, I really wouldn't have expected this from you. I know you've always been super punctual and committed. And then it's what happened? Where were you? You left X, Y, and Z people hanging. But if I just started with what happened, where were you? You left people hanging, and nothing kind to give some sort of support. It's very possible that something, really tragic happened, or there's something in your life going, not well, and it'll make a difference for you if I came at you the first way than the second way. And right? And it's not gonna make a difference for me from the perspective of getting the information or dealing, other than I'm gonna be in my relationship with you is gonna make a difference. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and not only room for it, it's like those conversations have to be had. I mean, I run a massive, operation of stuff that they can't be avoided. That would be a terrible thing. Let's just start with challenging ourselves to say something truly positive, and you can't make it up, by the way. Accurate. It has to be accurate. Can't make it up. Can't make it up. Has to be super real. Yep. Yep. Kiss, kick, push. It helps people. And the push is the forward. This is what we're gonna do now, right? Like the push is the third thing of how do you move it forward? Push it forward. Same thing. So much like our hard skills, our, soft skills need training and it needs to be consistent. So it takes 7 years, by the way, to develop a new habit in the way we speak, a new habit in the way we, let's say, we interact with people, whatever it is, it's a new habit. And we want this habitual. We want these EQ skills, to be a habit. So that means training, that means, reviews, like having this conversation constantly front and center to managers is partially training is a big piece of that. So everything from, the problem we have, John, is that there isn't a lot of training places, or even the ones that I want us to have don't really exist. I'm actually in the process of talking to a few firms and seeing if we can together create something that would really help. But we've got Myers-Briggs, we've got situational leadership. I love both of those things. They're very powerful. But there isn't, the model of win-win communication training, or managing a calendar or making and managing measurable agreements. The things that I train on and have been trained on in all of our orgs across the world, it's not a program that somebody can go sign up for, and I'm always telling people, you hear something, you let me know because I'll promote it. It's just, there isn't a whole lot of it. So, we need to use the ones that we have, and then organizations have got to care enough to create them. Management training, the training of managing others is part of that is training, and part of that's the check-in, the how you doing, working with the person. I mean, it used to be HR that managed this whole function, and now I feel like it's only a few departments that get that support, you know. Yeah. Yes, 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 yes. Yeah. Somebody to talk to. When it's go when it, like I occupy that role here at CyberSN. Of course, my the head of HR does too. It's her and I together, and that's where does somebody go and they're having trouble, or they didn't do win-win well, or KP well, and they've got a situation. Do they have support? Is there a way to even talk about how they did what they did to help them do it better? Those are the things that it's just not a one-time thing. It's not a one-time conversation or a one-time training. It's holding the space for consistently conversation. I do too. I do too. The problem is much like security. It's like, well, when you say the term HR, it's like, oh my gosh, there's so many. You got payroll and pay and compliance and people recruiting, and yeah, so many things fall under it. It's like, what part of HR are we judging, and so they need support in really splitting up the different areas of what they do, and having that clear language of what they do. Yes, it's traditionally fallen under training, which falls under human resources, and then traditionally it's fallen to like executive training, like it's a little. Yeah. You know, absolutely. And this is the number one ding ding ding. Every time there's a problem of conflict, almost always in an org is who was responsible for what, or overworking somebody because you don't really know what they do. Those are the two things. And so this is something I've watched in conflict resolution for years and years. Like, it's almost like, oh, let me guess, you didn't have a measurable agreement. Like, I'll hear the whole story and let me guess, you didn't know, it's like constant. So very hard to do, coming up in sales like I did. It was kind of easy, you're responsible for this, this amount of revenue or this amount of jobs or this, right? So it's sort of easy to measure. When you start talking about all other departments, it can be more challenging, and therefore it takes more time to really map it out. Now, my job description work has changed that for our clients, and for anybody who wants to use it, it's free. You can build your jobs, and that is the review mechanism that my clients use. Every task and every project, percentage break, it's all there. Now, I grew up in that in the 90s. It's still something I live and die by today. And when I don't have the ability to fully define somebody's job because I'm growing so quickly, which happens at companies, I tell them that. And we put in the calendar a date to keep getting together, and we keep defining and defining as they're onboarding and growing and sort of getting their feet under them the first 3 to 6 months. I'm in the conversation. We knew it. We planned it. It's not like I didn't have the conversation and just left them. So there are times when we can't do this. It should be pretty rare. Otherwise, it's not just role and responsibility, but it's how much time they're responsible to spend on that. And then once you're in project mode, what's the delivery date? Training people, like, the minute you know you can't hit that delivery date is when you speak up. You don't wait a week or 2 weeks, or it's that conversation. So first it's making measurable agreements, and then it's managing measurable agreements, and it's teaching others how to do it as well as doing it ourselves as managers. Things change and dates will have to change, but changing them last minute, changing them after you've known for a time period, that people see that stuff, and you lose credibility and lose, any sort of prestige of who you are as a manager if you're doing those things. And then everybody else needs trained on how to do it. So it's the key to operations, bottom line. Yeah. So if it's not written down, it doesn't matter. So that's the bottom line. So it's got to be written down. And so I tell everybody, make measurable agreements with your boss and have them written down and use them every time you're together on your one-on-ones, and make sure you're on the same page. And when they change, just like change control, do a change, document it, send it to the person, make them acknowledge it. I mean, it's called managing up, which is what situational leadership talks a lot about. Like, if you're gonna, we all have to put our, career into the hands of others in most of our lives. Do it wisely, help them help you, so yes, documenting it is and changing the documentation, updating it, I should say, is critical to this, you know yeah. Yeah, I talked about this a little bit earlier in that, it traditionally has been taught to salespeople, which is unfortunate, super unfortunate. But really what oh gosh. Yeah, which means, all you're dealing with is problems, and you still got to sell or come up with a solution, or, and so it's win-win communication says, you got to have the ability to work with teams, and not everybody gets what they want, but they feel like they won. So it's the art of language, it's the art of solution making, it's the art of listening. It's everything really combined, such that you're able to solve problems and people still feel good when they didn't get what they wanted or exactly what they wanted. And that's traditionally a, sort of a sales skill, and now it has to be for everybody. And it's probably one of the biggest problems I see constantly is, just the language around how we're solving things that turns people off big time. Yeah, mm, that's that's right. Yeah, Amazon has one of their value props. I forget how it goes, but I've always, latched onto the concept of, if there's a decision made in the organization at the top or whatever the top is of that decision, then everybody has to agree with it. And if you can't do that, don't work here because yeah, it doesn't work otherwise. So yes, that's a great example. The bottom line is, and what's so interesting about all eight of these, and win-win kind of encompasses most of the communication of it all, is that what we're talking about is how do we have diversity? And what I'm saying is our environments aren't even inclusive for let's say white men because they're moving jobs every year to 18 months and unhappily so, meaning that's not what they set out to do because these environments don't have this. So this isn't just so that we can bring in diversity professionals, which we have to do because our attackers are diverse. This isn't a question of whether we want to or not. We better if we're going to anywhere near win or at least evade. Then we have to. The reality is everybody needs it. This is like the if you're a minority going into a chaotic environment that doesn't have all this down just makes it worse. But it doesn't mean it's not bad for those that are already there, i.e., let's say white men. It is, and it's not working for them either. And so, the reason I'm out there saying this is let's create inclusive environments to have high retention, and so that we can retain everybody. And these, yeah, exactly, exactly, right. That's right. It's mental safety. And, we're all going to go out and find diversity professionals because I think we know that if we're not diverse, we can't win. And we need the numbers too. Never mind the fact that our attackers, you have to. Huge. Of all ages, I just hired somebody many, many years older than me. I have already had somebody here older than me, and even their perspective too. So it's ages of all ages, as well as as you said, race, religion, gender. So yes, this is why I'm out there saying, look, you want diversity, have an inclusive environment because you're going to go find them if you want them, and then you're going to lose them because if your environment isn't inclusive already, you're going to lose them. And hey, by the way, this will help you retain all the men too that I'm watching move jobs for these exact reasons. Because when we say people leave people, we leave people because they're not caring for us, not just because they're jerks, right? So, yes, there are jerks out there treating people wrong, purposely just totally wrong for the job. But then there's people out there that just don't know how to care for others. And that's also losing people. So either way, it's this kind of, sort of, again, holding the space for the thought of will make a difference. Exactly. Exactly. And, it impacts, it's hard to bring a positive attitude unless other people are positive too. You can only do that for so long. So it's also a win-win for, for everybody to enjoy work. Like we're going to all die one day, as much as that's a terrible thing. It's true. I told you. I told you. It's so true. So, uh, you're correct. Yeah. I'll I'll buy us all a spot. No, in all seriousness, let's enjoy this time. We work more than we do anything, and much of this comes from that too. That desire for I want that, and so do others. So, thank you. I think we did a great job. I appreciate the time. What was it? Yeah, what was it? Oh God, yeah. Jeez Louise, that's a good one. Well, you know, will. Yes. Exactly. Email me at dd@cybersn.com. Yay. Thank you. You're welcome. Yay. Me too.